I mean to say, one is American retreat and second is this 500% tariff. Your opening comments, how will this affect India if it comes into force, sir?
The first word that comes to mind is mind-boggling, if I can say so, because I thought that 25% additional duty on India, sparing China from that net, was actually a madness, considering that we thought that India and USA were partners in the international peace and security and stability in Indo-Pacific region. But anyway, it happened. On the other hand, China escaped it. Now, 500% additional duty will be really mind-boggling, number one. Number two, impact on India. I think India had already begun the process of diversifying its trade destinations. And our dependence on the USA as a major market hopefully has begun to come down. With a 500% tariff, our exports to the USA are going to be severely impacted in any case, and we will have to look for the additional other markets. The problem is that when you begin to look for these kind of alternative markets, the competition suddenly enhances. It goes through the roof. And in that competition, what role will China play? In fact, I'm rather worried that with this kind of an additional duty, it could probably lead to greater isolation of the USA internationally, not just trade, but politically. And with that isolation, how Trump is going to behave, I do not know. Whether Trump will decide that because of this isolation, he has to invade India or China or something. I don't know really. It's difficult to say how he's going to work it out, but it's going to be creating quite a few, not just ripples, but storm.
Okay. Ambassador Jain Dasgupta, the other thing which is evident is that in American scheme of things, India means nothing. I mean to say 25%, 50%. When you talk about 500%, I mean, so it's a sure way to really not only shake a relationship, but to shake its foundation.
Well, I think anything above 50, and especially if other competitors are in the region of 19, 20, 25%, that puts you out of the market in any case. And that is what has happened to about 45% of India's exports to the US. But of course, the electronic sector, pharmaceuticals, mobile phones, these have all been left out of the tariffs of 50% by the US administration. So 500, whether it is 500% or 300% or 2000%, it doesn't really matter because no trade will take place at those levels. Even now at 50% tariffs, when the other competitors are having a tariff of 25 or 20%, it has already dried up. So it is only a headline grabbing kind of a thing, which Lindsey Graham and Blumenthal are indulging in. The second point I wanted to make is that this is a private bill, and whether it will even receive the full support of the Republicans and the Democrats, separately, that remains to be seen, because I don't think that there are too many senators and House of Representatives members who would give these kind of powers to President Trump, especially because only about 10.5 months now remain for the midterm elections. And empowering President Trump could lead to a very different kind of feeling amongst the people. So that is the second point. The third point is that the tariffs, whether they will apply on buying from Rosneft and Lukoil, which India has stopped buying from, or they will apply across the board to other Russian oil entities, from which apparently India has now diverted and is buying some oil. Now, if and when it comes through, then India will stop buying from these Russian entities also. But if President Trump wants to stop completely the sale of Russian oil, it will have definitely an impact on global supplies. And then it could affect the consumers in the US as well, because after all, global prices will get reflected. And US inflation rate is already at 3%. So he has to make a very complex kind of a calculation while imposing sanctions.
I think, sir, Midas touch of Donald Trump is that he's dealing with most complex things very simply. That is why you have the issues of purchase of Greenland through a brokered negotiation, and why it is important. Professor Scott Lucas, your opening comments on Trump green lighting this private member bill. And I always say that apart from what happens in the House, like a lot of people say that the private members bill in Indian parliament doesn't mean a thing, unless until the government adopts it. But the fact that you allow it, the fact that you support it, it's sending a signal. 500%.
Yeah, it's a signal, but I'd be cautious in terms of whether we're talking about this being an imminent bill that will be adopted. I mean, this has been touted for months by Senators Graham, Senator Blumenthal, and the Trump administration has actually gone a different route. For example, with the sanctions on Russia's oil companies, which India has felt the effect of. I think even if Trump said he was going to greenlight this, there are a whole series of hurdles for this to go through. And I would say at this point, this is more of a Trump thought bubble. This is him shaking his fist again at the Russians and at India as well. Now, I think there's a wider point, however, which is that
I think there's a bit of a feed problem with our friend Professor Scott Lucas. Ambassador Goel, my question is very simple here, that okay, it may take time, 500% may not take place, but why is Trump so oblivious to what has happened in past 25 years between New Delhi and Washington,
No, that's a good question, really, because right in the beginning of the presidency, the impression was, and we had thought, that Prime Minister Modi and President Trump are getting so happily together, really, like old friends. But clearly, things are very different. Now, I think Trump, if I can speak rather candidly on this channel now here, I think Trump has in mind his ambitions of coming with China, using China in a sense in this global rivalry for power, and thinking of Indo-Pacific as the area for China, and therefore leave Taiwan out. The only other country which actually is a fly in the ointment in the scheme of China being Indo-Pacific and USA being Latin America is India. And in that case, I don't really see Trump thinking anything of sacrificing Indian interest in the mind. I mean, look at the way he refers to Prime Minister Modi. He's a good friend, but he came to me. Oh, my dear sir, can I meet you for a few minutes? It's a very derisive and very derogatory kind of a language to be used for the head of a country, the head of government. And the way he went in Venezuela, therefore, somebody mentioned that he's a purely mercantile person. He is. But I don't think he has a kind of respect for India that we saw in the first term. Obviously, the perceptions have changed. Obviously, his own idea of the global power matrix has changed. And now he looks at the world in terms of G2, China, Indo-Pacific, the USA, the Southern Hemisphere, the Western Hemisphere, as he has said it. That's what my assessment is. We will have to wait for more to see whether this is true or not.
Okay. And sir, Professor Scott Lucas is back. Professor, this 500% development is also accompanied by United States of America withdrawing from 66 international bodies, both UN and non-UN. One thing which caught my eye, sir, was he has also exited, in fact, two, Intergovernmental Climate Panel, and the second, the Solar Alliance led by France and India, to which India has been very much committed for mitigating the climate change effects. This American retreat from global affairs is getting married to Trump's imperial ambitions, and this makes the world a very dangerous place, Professor.
Yeah, absolutely. I apologize for getting cut off earlier. The point I was going to make with respect both to the 500% tariff and to your general question here is, in a way, the 500% is just Trump shaking his fist. The wider and very serious point here is, not only do you have an unpredictable, a chaotic Trump, beyond Trump, you have advisors who no longer believe in alliances. I mean, they don't believe in an alliance with Europe, let alone with India. They no longer believe in international organizations. Therefore, they're withdrawing from them. They no longer believe in regional organizations. It will be interesting, for example, to see if they still remain committed to the Quad with India. This group around Trump only believes in personal power for themselves. It is a return almost to the 19th century colonialism of men who think they can dominate the rule or they can carve it up. What happens here is that India becomes expendable in this. You know, you've had your ups and downs with various U.S. administrations. It has not been smooth. What you have to realize here is you cannot assume there is any type of goodwill from these men in terms of a cooperative relationship. They will see you in terms of a transaction. Can they get money out of you? Can they get influence out of you? And that means that that personal relationship that you just heard about, which Prime Minister Modi had held up with Donald Trump, and it was very prominent in the first term, that means very little now, because the United States does not see other countries or other leaders as equals. At least the Trump people don't. They see you only as people who should bow down to them. You may not get a 500% tariff. It may stay only at 50%, but you still will be held economically and politically hostage by whatever their next whim is.